3 years ago, I became one of the first homeowners in the state of Wisconsin to find out that I had boxwood blight in my yard. And after I cleaned it up and I burned those plants, I thought I was probably never going to get another boxwood plant again. But now, thanks to amazing plant breeding in my yard, the boxwood are back, baby. Hi everyone, I'm Erin the Impatient Gardener, and I live and garden here in southeastern Wisconsin, zone 5B, 6A. And 3 years ago, I became the fifth homeowner in the state of Wisconsin to have a confirmed case of boxwood blight in my garden. In fact, in this garden that I'm standing right in front of. Now, we actually think that the boxwoods I had in this area that were infected with blight actually came that way. I purchased them that way. So that was all the more reason why I was not going to be buying any more boxwoods, because I didn't want to take a chance of infecting other boxwoods on my property by bringing in potentially diseased boxwoods. Boxwood blight is a fungus disease that is extremely contagious, and it defoliates your boxwoods and then ultimately kills them. Now, the idea that I might not be able to have boxwoods in my landscape was pretty devastating, because they check off a lot of boxes for me in terms of a landscape plan. And that's because they're deer resistant, they're hardy in my zone, they're easy to prune or size control if I need to. But more than that, and kind of the clincher for me, is that they grow in both sun and shade. But last year, I planted 9 skylight boxwoods from Better Boxwood in the mixed hedge that we planted between us and our neighbors. So these skylight boxwoods are flushing out with growth unbelievably well this year. It's lovely shiny leaves, and this skylight has kind of an oblong leaf on it. And the leaves harden off to a dark green, but of course the new growth is lighter and really beautiful. And these guys are big guys. They will grow to 6 to 8 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide, which makes them perfect for this area, which is just along my driveway, but again in my screening hedge. But the best thing about them is that they have been bred to be boxwood blight resistant. Now, boxwood blight was a problem in Europe before it was a problem in the United States. So breeders have had a chance to be working on this problem for some time now. And this year, Better Boxwood has introduced 4 boxwood blight varieties. Now, when I think about plant breeding, I often think about bloom qualities, perhaps a special color of a flower or longer lasting blooms or a compact plant over a really large plant. But in the case of Better Boxwood, what we're talking about is breeding that has led to actually the ability to continue growing these plants. So in addition to the skylights that I added last year, I was able to add the other 3 varieties of Better Boxwoods to my garden this year. So let's go take a look at it and I'll show you where they are. So I planted these boxwoods in front of the vegetable garden about 5 years ago for all the reasons why I like boxwoods. I wanted to prune them into sort of an undulating cloud shape, which is still developing, by the way. And I needed something that was perfectly deer resistant, and I have never had a deer eat a boxwood. I'm not saying they won't do it, but I will say I have never seen them even think about doing it. Also, one corner of this tends to be a little shadier than the other, so I find it to be a really adaptable plant if you're dealing with an area that has a little bit of change of exposure in it. Now, almost all these boxwoods are a variety called Glencoe, which I grew from tiny little plugs for many years before I put them in here. Turns out Glencoe is also the variety I had that got boxwood blight, and you can look up lists of how susceptible a certain boxwood variety is to blight, and Glencoe is pretty far up that list. So I was very worried about these, and I've been very careful about making sure I don't spread any latent spores that might still be over in that other garden over here to take out these boxwoods or any of the other boxwoods that I have in my garden. But it bothered me that it wasn't quite finished. I had a few holes. I really wanted to kind of wrap it around the corners. But again, I wasn't going to just add any old boxwood to this. So that is where Better Boxwood came in handy. Now in Skylight, I definitely noticed that the leaves are a little bit more oblong. But when I look at the other 3 varieties that Better Boxwood has come out with, the main difference between them, at least to my eye, is what their ultimate mature size is going to be. So in terms of size, working from the big guy, Skylight, on down, the next variety in terms of size is Heritage, and that's going to be 3 to 4 feet high by 2 to 3 feet wide. In my mind, this is very similar in size to like a green mountain boxwood. So the next one in terms of size is Babylon Beauty, and I think this is the one that most people are going to gravitate towards because it's a very sort of traditional all-purpose boxwood size. So it's about 3 feet tall, 4 to 5 feet wide is the mature size on this. And then the next one which I think is kind of a really cool size, is 1 to 2 feet tall and wide. This is what I think people are looking for a short hedge are going to gravitate towards. I like it because in this cloud prune hedge, I'm sort of thinking that I'd like to grow it to about that 1 foot high and then as wide as I can get it, almost like a Ottoman boxwood sort of. So in all other respects, these boxwoods want the same care as any other boxwood that you are already growing. Make sure you give them water to establish them. I like to give them a little bit of fertilizer, prune them maybe once a year, which is when I prune mine. Some people like to prune theirs a little more, but I don't really tightly clip mine. But you can do whatever you want with these boxwoods in terms of pruning, not pruning. I would think most of those skylights I am not going to prune, except for maybe just a little bit of tidying up if they get really out of range. But my idea is not to have a tightly pruned cone there. I think those will look beautiful in that spot being a little bit more natural, but you can do whatever you want with them. And the only difference is that you don't have to worry about boxwood blight with these. Now, when breeders are developing these plants, they actually try to infect these boxwoods with boxwood blight. And that's how they know if it's working or not. Now, I don't find boxwoods to be particularly fast growing in my area, which is why it's particularly soul crushing when something happens to them after you've been growing them for years. So I do think that skylight, just given how much growth I've seen it put on this spring, probably is a faster grower. And maybe in some areas they do grow quite quickly. But for me, this is a long-term investment in growing a plant out. And I want to make sure that it's going to be fine for the future. I really think in 10 years or so, blight-resistant boxwoods like Better Boxwood are going to be the only kind of boxwoods anybody's going to be buying. So that's the story of how plant breeding is allowing me to have boxwoods again, and I am thrilled about it. So if you're concerned about boxwood blight, and I think many of us probably should be, just know that there are alternatives out there and you don't necessarily have to give up boxwood. So I hope that helps you in your garden, and a big thank you to Better Boxwood for partnering with me on this video, sending me these boxwoods so that I can tell you guys about the cool things that plant breeding is doing for all of us gardeners. All right, have a great day in your garden. We'll see you soon.